I just had the opportunity to visit Tijuana, and I went there for a couple reasons. The main reason was that Webert Maryland was installed as the new pastor of Mary Immaculate Church. It was actually the Archbishop of Tijuana who insisted that the name be Mary Immaculate, so that people would tie it right away with the mission and ministry of the Oblates in Tijuana. As you know, we have given over to the Archdiocese of Tijuana the rectory that we were living in, the clinic that we were serving, a community center, and a place for kids that are mentally challenged. So we've turned over to the Archdiocese a lot that they can now move into. And I met the two diocesan priests that will be ministering where we once were. With the move that we are making as Oblates to the railroad tracks where the new poor are moving in from Central America and from southern Mexico, I saw the rectory that was being built thanks to the generosity of many United States donors. We are very fortunate to have so many people that are also committed to that mission and that pray for that mission with us. So the new rectory was practically finished, and then Father Webert Maryland was installed in the parish, not a new parish, because the Archbishop insisted that we use the old youth center that the Oblates had built for the new church. But it was nice to have him be installed as the new pastor of these new poor that are currently living in that area. The mission is going to be very difficult. Also planned now, besides the rectory that is being built, we want to build a new youth center to continue the work that we were doing at the old parish. There is a clinic already there that we want to continue to refurbish and make it more amenable for people that have medical issues, dentists, eyes, and all that kind of stuff. As well as building some mission chapels that will serve the new poor. Obviously, a lot of these people, the vast majority, don't have a car. They have no way to get to church on Sunday. So despite the fact we have this large church where Father Webert is the pastor, we also, of course, like we did before, need these mission churches so that people can worship in their own area by walking to church. So that's next in our plans for the mission in Tijuana. Always great to see these young Oblates who are so enthused. And then at Casa Estudiantil, where Father Bill Antone is the director, we have 5 pre-novices studying there. So those numbers are up as well. So Bill and Brother Peter Vasquez will have their hands full in training these guys to become Oblates and take the next step of going to the novitiate. So Father Webert Maryland will be the new pastor of the parish. Father Jesse Escada is also the vocation director, but helps out in the parishes when he's there on weekends. But as you can imagine, does quite a bit of traveling with the vocation recruiting that he does. Also there is Father Marek Stroba, who helps in the parish. And Father Lucio Castillo is the director of the clinic, more Monday through Friday. The new clinic that we're going to refurbish, but also, of course, helps out in the parish on the weekends. So it's great to have these 6 Oblates, who most of them who are quite young and full of a lot of life to serve the new poor in a very welcome way. The Under 10 meeting, we call the Under 10 meeting that name, because it's a retreat, a social time, a gathering of Oblates who have been in vows 5 years or less, and those in vows 10 years or less may also come to the meeting. So required of the guys 5 years or less, the guys 10 years or less can also come to the meeting. We had a very special retreat this year because it was given by Ron Rollheiser, whom a lot of people know as a great spiritual writer and Oblate of Mary Immaculate. He spoke on the vows, which did an excellent job. The under 10 guys find this meeting, I think, quite rich. It's a good time for them to support one another, spend some social time together, pray together, and share their insights in ministry. They're involved in many different ministries, so that's always interesting to hear some of the things they've learned, some of the challenges they've met, some of the things they probably haven't done in the right way, things they can laugh at together when we gather. But I also want to speak about a book that I've recently read by Ron Rollheiser called Wrestling with God. And I mentioned that to some of the guys during the under 10 meeting. One of the chapters in there especially was significant and meaningful for me, and as I said, I shared it with some of the under 10 guys. In there, he talks about Mother Teresa and the struggles that she had in her prayer life the very last years of her life. She wrote a book about this. And you would have expected, I suppose, that she would have given up, stopped her ministry among the poor on the streets of Calcutta, not been able to continue on, because she said so often her prayer was empty. She didn't find that God was with her, or didn't sense that God was with her. And Father Rollheiser actually talks about that to great length in that chapter on faith. And what he says, I hope I interpreted what he's saying correctly, but what he says in there is that the emptiness she felt, the loneliness she experienced, the fact that she didn't know if God was listening or didn't get any emotional feedback, positive feedback from those prayer experiences, he says, I think God was purifying her intention, drawing her deeper, if you will, helping her to kind of get out of the way in terms of that prayer and allow God to take over, or allow God or Jesus to be a deeper part of that prayer. So always drawing her in more, even though she continued to feel that negativity or that emptiness that she did in her prayer. Because I think that was what Ron talked about a bit with the guys too. That in your frustration, in your wondering if you're meeting the goals that you've set for yourself, if you're effective in your ministry, essentially, he said sometimes the failure or the disappointment might be God leading you to go deeper and to look again at that ministry, or look again at that prayer that you're experiencing, and find that God is there, but God is drawing you deeper, and God wants to take over a bit more himself and help you get out of the way. Many of you know that Oblates are involved in a wide range of ministries: shrines, retreat houses, parishes, hospitals, prisons, the list goes on and on, teachers. One of the most fascinating ministries that I visited in a long time was the work that Father Dan LeBlanc is doing in the heart of Manhattan. I went there with Art Flores, who's Vicar Provincial, and learned a lot more about Dan's ministry. First of all, Dan lives at Ascension Parish in Upper Manhattan, which is a poor area. And a lot of the people, as Art and I and Dan walked together around the area, "Hi, Father Dan, how are you? Good to see you." So obviously he's well known by many of the local people in the area, poor people and street people. But we went to the United Nations, where Dan spends most of his time, and through Vivat International, along with other religious who work at the UN, Dan's job is really to monitor, to investigate further, to keep track of any decisions, any policies, any procedures of the UN that affect the poor, the homeless, refugees. And in fact, he proudly told me that this social development conference that's coming up next February, each year they look for what the theme is going to be for this conference. And of course, with the name social development, it usually revolves around the development of people around the world. He had been pushing, along with some other religious, Dan is the only oblate at the UN, he had been pushing, along with some other religious, to have the topic of the homeless be investigated further at this conference. So what this conference does is looks at the situation, or will look at the situation that these homeless are facing, what causes homelessness, what kind of people they are, and how can we help them. And so Dan is very proud that that's been chosen. Homelessness has been chosen as the official theme of this conference. As we also were walking on the streets in Upper Manhattan, those of you who have visited Manhattan, you see all these garbage cans, these plastic garbage containers on the side of the streets in Manhattan. Sometimes restaurants put them out there, and there are so many of them that you can hardly get by the restaurant. So Dan got the idea, because he's aware of so many homeless on the streets in the area where he lives, along with some of these other religious, that they should approach the city and see what the possibility would be if the homeless could, with bags that are specially marked by the grocers, whoever puts them on the streets, in specially marked bags, to have food, fruit, vegetables, that they can't serve the next day, but that are still good. So that kind of food, those kinds of fruits and vegetables, especially marked bags, the poor, the homeless, have access to so that they can get something to eat. So Dan is not only doing some great work for the poor and the refugees at the UN, but in his own neighborhood the same. I am sometimes asked the question, what's it like being provincial? I learned a little bit more about what that might be like when I served as Vicar Provincial, and Father Bill Antone and I traveled around together, and so you see what the responsibilities are and how to carry those out. But of course, I think each provincial gives their own take on it and certainly does things in a different way. I know Father Bill would agree with me when I say that one of the great highlights of being provincial is when you can witness guys renewing their vows, taking perpetual vows, getting ordained. In other words, seeing more members join our ranks, more guys that are committed to this way of life, who believe in the charism of St. Eugene, and who just genuinely want to do a lot of good ministry in the world. One of the discoveries that I've made since I've been provincial, didn't realize that we have many guys in the province that are over 90 years old, not over 80, over 90 years old, still in good health, doing good ministry. And in fact, it's quite surprising. Even some of them who aren't in great health still want to do something, have a reason to get up in the morning. And they have been so generous in the work they do. They're not pastors of parishes, they're not directors of shrines or retreat houses, but in their own way, their own just way of being, not maybe so much work that they do, but the witness they give, the prayers that they offer, and the ways that they're involved in people's lives is really impressive. So I'm thinking, for example, of Father Tom Hayes, who was my novice master. Tom turned 91 last August. He's still chaplain every other day of the week at the Esquilin community. And so he has Mass there, he hears confessions, he has funerals, he does spiritual direction, counseling with the people that are at the Esquilin. Just impressive that when you know Tom's age, he doesn't look that old or act that old, but the good work that he does. I would say being provincial has its very high moments, such as when guys take vows or guys that are older and still in ministry, but it's got its low moments too. You learn about guys that are having difficulty in their ministry, maybe even questioning their vocation as oblates, deciding whether or not they should leave. And they rely on some advice oftentimes from leadership, from the provincial. Those are difficult moments because you see the agony they're going through, the difficulty they're experiencing, having made this commitment and now maybe not knowing whether they can stay with it. I very much honor the process that they go through. I think all of them or most of them really pray about it. And especially the guys that if they haven't made perpetual vows yet, they sometimes, when I visit these formation communities, they will rely on a objective ear, shall I say, to help them in their discernment process. But those are difficult moments. Certainly when we have to give up parishes, we are fewer and fewer oblates in the United States. We know those numbers are going to continue to go down, and that makes it challenging when we have to leave a place. The good news about that is often I hear people say, boy, this place won't be the same without the oblates. Or if I happen to go back to the parish after we've left there for a while, and then they tell me it's very different now that the oblates are no longer here. We have this reputation and we like to say we're close to the people. I do see that most often in the ways that we minister to people. We're close to the people, and when we leave a place, people really miss that about us.